Hello and welcome to this video. I am going to show you how to shade a volume, and this is our subject matter. It's a bulb, floodlight bulb, and I've taken the liberty of sketching in the construction lines for my drawing, and you can see I was very careful to preserve symmetry. But how have I done that? Well, I've used my two principal lines, the horizontal principal line and the vertical principal line. Help me keep things in order and make sure that my outside contours are parallel and that the subject matter is not leaning either left or right. You can see I've also added in the contours. You may be able to see very faintly some of the straight construction lines I drew with my ruler, and then went back over with my pencil and added a curve to give it the appearance of the bulb. Okay, so let's take another look at this drawing and let's just talk about some of the characteristics of it. I actually darkened the photo a little bit to give you something to shade. And you see that the light coming from the front gives us a highlight, and then the local value around. And then you see the shadows define the contours and start to creep around very softly on the edges of the bulb. We've got some reflected light here coming down on the threads of the bulb, highlights here on these different sections, and then you see a pretty dark cast shadow and a little bit of a reflected light along the bottom of the bulb. So nothing new to us here based on our previous experience, but what I want to do is just shade for a little while, and this will be mostly real-time drawing. Every now and then I'll make a comment, but I'm primarily interested in just showing you the process. So let's begin. I'm going to pause for a moment and review what I've done so far. So you can barely see it, but I did draw in some lines here along the edge to help me match where the shadows and the highlights are separated. So when I begin to blend more, add more value, I know where those boundaries are. Secondly, I've just used Dragon's Tail to put down some value all over the surface of the area. And you may notice that I kind of sloppily went beyond the contour, and that's all right. We are using a very loose technique right now. Later, as we go in and aim at some details, I'll use more precision. Oddly enough, once the drawing is finished, either most of those lines will disappear magically, or I can erase them later on if I really want to. Okay, so the initial value was just diagonal lines, a grounding of my value, a light value. Now I'm going to start to lay in a little more heavy value, and I will probably, let's see, I'm going to focus on the main body of the bulb. All right, let's pause for a moment. You can see I'm focusing on this part of the drawing. It's very dark values here. There is a kind of a separation between a very dark value and a lighter value there. And so you can start to see that I'm defining that a little bit more, but I have a long ways to go. based on our experience of drawing value scale, you can see that the value I'm going to be aiming for here is really right down to the bottom, not quite a 1, maybe a value of 2, whereas this is maybe more of a value of 4 or 5, and then just barely changing, but noticeably changing to a slightly lighter value as I move down. Okay, let's pause again. So I've finished the upper third of this part of the bulb, and now I'm going to concentrate on the middle part. And from the photograph, you can see it's kind of an oval shape, and there's a highlight right here, and it actually has a little bit of the bottom defined here. So it looks kind of like nesting spheres, maybe like a snowman, if you want to look at it that way. Or a cloud floating. So, but the key point is it's a very soft edge. So I want to blend softly and build up my values gradually. I'm going to pause for a minute because at this point, it looks like I've totally drawn over the area where the highlight is. But what I can do is take my kneaded eraser and erase that spot. I don't have an kneaded eraser handy right now, but I do have another eraser, which should do the job. That is not an accurate reconstruction of the highlight, but now that I've gotten that graphite out of the way, I can go back and more carefully add in some tone and then define that a little bit better. You'll notice the pencil moves in two directions, which I call weave and weft, and that is side to side, which captures the volume, the curvature of the bulb, and the other is more or less vertical, and that follows the contour, the outline of the bulb. So I'm going to pause for a moment and let's reflect on what's happening here so far. This being the largest part of the bulb, more pencil strokes required, and it's looking pretty streaky. And so I want to work that until all those streaks go away. And as you know from our earlier demonstrations, starting off with dragon's tail to get the weave and the weft is a good way to go. And then if I'm still looking very streaky, I can go back over that with cloudy hands. Okay, so I've got, by now, I am not finished by any means, but you can see that I've got a good start on this side. And so to balance this, I just need to bring in more shading here as the shadows wrap around on the right side of the bulb. And we see here, there's a kind of a change in the material, so the glass becomes darker. But don't be fooled, there is a gradient there. You can see the gradient going from the seam to the bottom, catching that reflected light. And then the cast shadow is nice and strong, a really stark, strong value there. Probably just as strong as any value that you have up here. So that really helps the bulb or the object you're drawing to appear volumetric and round and to have some heft and weight. So that is, I'm going to end my demo there because I think I've done just about everything that we would want to cover here. The only thing I really didn't do were the threads, but what I've done is I've just traced those out, and I can proceed in the same way. Perhaps it's even easier because all I have to do is a series of dragon tail strokes going from darker to lighter. And if I don't leave a highlight there with the paper exposed, I can just go back over it later with an eraser and pull that out. Okay, I hope this helps.